So we looked at John Woo's films and watched them all, but obviously specifically paid close attention to Hard Boiled and really looked for those iconic elements that we wanted to lift directly from his films and put into the game. There's a lot of different things that the fans expect. Obviously, the overall look of the film is shot on certain film stock at a certain time, so there's a certain desaturation, a certain quality to the movies that we try to emulate in the game as well. You also have examples like the doves, the look of Tequila, the suits, the outfits. Obviously the Hong Kong environment is really important. It's very specific. It's not the high-tech Hong Kong, it's more of the rundown, shady Hong Kong. All of that we try to get into the game, and working with John and his crew, we brought it right across. Beyond that, obviously working with Chow Yun-fat on the Tequila character, it was important to get his likeness as realistic as possible. So we went and scanned Chow Yun-fat and basically worked his likeness to make him look like he did in the Hard Boiled films, and then put that into the game.
Tequila?
The way I like it.
You're the only one who does.
The nuances in the characters are very important because these are the detail that tells you that someone is realistic, that you can really identify. Since the beginning of Next Gen, with the possibility of doing higher textures and more detail on anything, and characters and backgrounds included, the idea was not to just do more, but also look at it from the idea of how can we create imperfection in the realism of a texture, a skin, or even a texture on an environment. These imperfections are what makes the character realistic, believable.
With Stefan Martiner coming into the company and using his techniques of photocopying to create textures within an environment, I thought, wow, what a great idea. What if we were to do that with the characters themselves and take all the features from a bunch of different people expressing exactly what we want that character to say, or what personality we want that character to have, and merging them all together in Photoshop and making a completely original person.
So it's about creating characters that are believable.
Inspector Tequila is a cop who works in Hong Kong who is a little bit burnt out, he's a little bit frazzled around the edges, he's not a typical good soldier cop. The first costume that you get is not a police uniform, it's sort of street clothes basically, with his badge not high and center like the normal cops wear, but down on his belt. So he's a little bit undercover, and but he's also a little bit, out in front that he is a cop. So he's somewhere in the middle. He's trapped between the two worlds. I'm a cop, I'm gonna go do my own thing.
Captain Lee is Tequila's captain. He's a very sort of traditional, loud, angry police captain, and he is forever being frustrated by Tequila stepping over the line.
Stylistically, it was important with Inspector Lee that he be very upstanding and very straightforward. He wears a suit and tie buttoned all the way up. His hair is brushed. He's a very put together, kind of represents authority and very much in charge of the policemen under his district. So we didn't do anything sloppy or loose with him. He's just by the books.
Relax, everybody.
You are not.
You're not giving orders either, Tequila.
Mr. Wong wants to talk to you.
Jerry Ying is an old friend and partner of Tequila, but in the game, at this point in time, he's actually undercover working for the Dragon Claw.
We really wanted a face design that could be somewhere in between. So with his design, it was important that he's a little bit weaselly looking, but not enough to telegraph to the players what was going to happen in the story.
Young-gi is the leader of the Golden Cane. He's the young, ruthless punk who's just trying to muscle his way in and take over territory with any means that he can.
We really worked on him to strike a balance between a young, strong, powerful upstart and then have a little bit of the sort of wisdom and authority that you would associate with a boss.
I promise to be properly impressed. As soon as you explain to me how kissing high society ass helps me move more H.
I'll be right there.
Tai Lak is basically Young's henchman. He does the dirty work. He's the big, bulky guy who kind of takes care of all the little troubles that Young has along his way.
We wanted to try to push his look specifically to create a very identifiable character who could take control of some of the lesser thugs.
You call that hell?
It is just warming up.
Vlad Zakharov is the muscle behind the Russian mafia in Chicago.
Vlad is way more of a military lead pipe sort of dumb guy. His skull is thicker, you know?
Don't be in a rush. You got to see my museum. It adds a note of class to my business.
I didn't fly here to see a freaking museum. I came here to see one thing.
My operation. It's part of it.
Damon Zakharov is the brains behind the Russian mafia in Chicago.
He's the older brother to Vlad. He's ruthless, very sophisticated, a former statesman in Russia who now controls this mafia underworld.
Let's head down to the party.
Let me clear it up for you. The Golden Cane put out the hit on your cop, not Dragonclaw.
James Wong is the head of the Dragonclaw, and he's been in charge since he was a kid. He inherited that role from his father. So he's never known anything else but running this underground mafia. We wanted to really make him stand out as the boss of all the bosses, and all of the violence that he causes is through his people and his power.
With the characters, I think that we've gone places that nobody else has gone before. We just said this is what our vision is. Let's all get together and just do it and not let anything hold us back. These guys are all real people, you know, real living people without being people that live in our real world. And it's fascinating to me.
Well, when we started the project, we really wanted to make the environment special. We wanted to bring you something that you haven't seen in games before. We didn't want to do yet another warehouse that you've seen a million times. So we brought Stefan Martinet onto the project to really kind of give us that initial vision to make an area really special, to make it really stand out, to pick interesting areas that would be to view and to play into.
By the choice of a location, by how a location is being portrayed, by the photography that is being used to portray that location, all these ingredients tend to convey certain emotional impact, kind of like enhance the experience in one way or another. So I was always driven with these kind of ideas. So it was not just about creating Hong Kong because it's Hong Kong and Chicago because it's Chicago, but to how can we make these environments even more interesting than what they are in reality.
The game starts out in Hong Kong and takes place in kind of the back alleys and sort of the grungy side of Hong Kong. And then in the second act we come to Chicago, and it takes place in modern, opulent environments like a penthouse and a museum here in Chicago. And then we go back to Hong Kong for the third act.
Well, the marketplace was the very first Hong Kong environment that we're showing, exterior environment. So it was very important that we set the tone for what's coming into the game.
The marketplace is a really interesting location because it's full of market vendor stalls, people vending all kinds of different products. You've got fruit and meat and electronics and all that kind of stuff. And we have a really high degree of simulation around the player. One of the things that we really wanted to capture, as part of this kind of new flavor was all the stuff getting trashed and exploding,
And it winds a lot, so there's a lot of different terrain in the marketplace. It kind of goes up flights of stairs and down flights of stairs. Makes it very interesting in terms of tactical fighting, because a lot of times people have got height advantage over you, or you've got height advantage over them.
The marketplace was also very interesting because it was the place where we could experiment very quickly early on into the game in terms of the gameplay possibilities, in terms of how much action can we create in an environment like this.
The hangar is interesting in that it's a very hard location. A lot of our locations are very brittle and breakable, and the hangar is a very kind of rusted, old industrial location.
So I took the approach to create an environment that would be compelling visually, but that also would have a certain neutrality in terms of its palette, in terms of its color.
If you look at the hangar in detail and you look around, you'll see there's been some fairly severe structural damage to the engineering of the hangar.
We had wanted to do something that was unique and also on the water because Hong Kong's an island. So we created a space that is part water, part land.
We have a lot of really interesting moving mechanical elements in the hangar as well, which create some really interesting new interactions for the player.
The hangar feels almost like a cage. After walking through so many open areas, you finally channel into something that's going to be very closed and very rigid, and a lot of action is going to be happening. So it's almost like visually you're compressing all the action into one box.
The Mega Restaurant is based on a real location in Hong Kong, which is this vast kind of tourist trap. It's this like very kind of traditional Chinese architectural kind of, you know, floating pagoda sort of practically.
So it's very large rooms, very open environment. There's lots of decoration and lots of sculpture, but without being, you know, strictly high-end in a very, very expensive place.
We started thinking more like a floating casino. And if it's a floating casino and you start thinking of Las Vegas, there's really no limit what you can have in it. So we started exploring everything that could visually be gorgeous. But on top of that, we could offer some awesome gameplay and destructions in the process.
The Penthouse kind of again falls into one of these categories of, wow, that's a really nice place, you know, could be in Home and Garden, let's just completely trash it and destroy it.
The challenge there was to do something that's very modern and very high-end, you know, pull out all the stops. It's also the home base for Damon Zakharov, so it would have a Russian theme here in Chicago. So for that, what we envisioned was this guy has taken the top 3 or 4 floors of one of the biggest condo penthouses in Chicago and just completely gutted it and then redesigned it on his own.
The museum is a very interesting environment. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in a game before. It's very bright, it's very open, and there's all kinds of like weird artifacts. It's almost like without anybody to fight in there, you could walk around and just look at the exhibits like you would in a regular museum.
Very classical architecture, lots of priceless antiques and artifacts, you know, from a dinosaur exhibit to a terracotta soldier exhibit.
How many times can you have the ability to go and run free in the museum and jump after dinosaurs and, you know, run on the spines and shoot skulls all over the place and what have you? And that's, I think, what drove us to believe that, yes, the museum had to be, you know, one of the environments we had to have.
Slum City, that's a very dirty, grungy underground in Hong Kong. It's based off of the forgotten city of Calhoun, which was destroyed in 2000. And it's basically a section of the city that's walled off as its own slums. Police don't go in there, they don't receive traditional utilities. It's kind of a Wild West in there of people just trying to survive, the underclass and poor, as well as a pretty healthy criminal element.
We take you through an adventure through this in the dark of night in this raining storm that really sets the mood for a very clever battle throughout the alleyways. So you're going into tight areas, into bigger open areas, inside the buildings, outside the buildings, up and over them, and a lot of different variety of just working your way through this in a very cinematic, moody way.
Wong's Estate is the final chapter of the game, so this is where everything breaks loose. To a maximum intensity.
Wong's Estate is a very, very grand location. I mean, this guy is the guy with the money, you know, and he's had money for a long, long time, and it's really reflected in the architecture.
But to keep true to the character, I also wanted to make sure that we keep the old feel that Mr. Wong is, you know, the tradition, you know, the old part of China, as opposed to the new wave. And so everything has that very old, but very, very rich feel to it.
As far as the environments are concerned, oh my God, I'm just so blown away. Every time I sit down and I look at it, I can't believe how much they were able to take the concept done by Stefan and some of the other concept artists like Tae Choi and Angie Lei and Bruno Warnick and Jung Park and Sammy Hall. These guys, they created some beautiful, beautiful concept paintings in 3D blockouts stuff. Just mind-bogglingly awesome. And Jared Prano and his team were able to take that and almost verbatim create the exact same environment with Massive D.
I think we've achieved great visual for that game. We've really pushed the envelope. And since, I've approached the visual to be really there to support the story and to support the gameplay, that was also very important that it be there. And I think, we pushed in that direction as well. And what we have, I think, is very, very exciting. So it adds to the amount of realism that the game has and the amount of excitement that you're going to have playing.